Hey folks, Nev here with One Deal Away, and I wanted to come in and do a video based off of a post slash question on the last post that I did. So I guess it's a response to a response to a post. There's been a question of sort of, like what do I do with my mortgage? Do I refinance? Do I sell? Do I quit my job? Do I move? Like, what should I do? It's really hard for me to answer exactly what you should be doing with your money, with your wealth, with your life. And that has to be very much a personal decision, which I think all of us can understand. But I also wanted to do a little bit of conversation of kind of what I am seeing based off of some new data that has been coming in, such as jobless claims. As you know, the new jobless claim has been released on uh, about a week ago or so, and that number has jumped. So the first week of this closure and that kind of stuff, the jobless claim has basically jumped to 3.7 million. It's been adjusted since they first announced this. It was 3.3, now it's 3.7. The latest one that just came in is announcing 6.6 million people who have claimed a sort of unemployment, right? I think that that is going to be adjusted, and I do expect, based off of what happened with the previous week when we went from 3.3 to 3.7, I do expect this one to go from 6.6 to maybe 7 million. That combined is well over 10 million of people who in 2 weeks, in only 2 weeks, have claimed to be unemployed. That is a huge strain on the government and the fiscal stimulus that kind of needs to happen. And the nice part about what has transpired lately is that folks who are claiming unemployment now, because of the situation that we're currently in, the government is guaranteed to pay them what they have been paid thus far. So the nice part is that they're not necessarily losing on their income short term, but that does have a huge implication on all of the finance as well as the markets, as well as sort of what the future holds. We never in history, recorded history of financial world, economics, business, whatever you want to take it, have seen numbers as high as this. This is unprecedented, but not to be completely unexpected. It is something that I was expecting. I just didn't know necessarily what the numbers are or would be. And the reason for that is the financialization or the leverage that has entered the markets. The more leverage you have, the sort of the higher things can go, but also lower they can drop. So question has been coming in of like, what do I think is going to happen when it comes to mortgages and the real estate market and that kind of stuff. So mortgages right now, or at least as of a week ago, average rate was 3.65%. So that has been the average. If you are close to that number, it might not make sense to refinance. And the reason for that is that when you do refinance, there are typically fees associated with it. Oftentimes they're called points. And I know that points kind of sound lovely when you are in school, for example, but in this case scenario, points basically means that you are being charged something. So you want to carefully calculate whether it makes sense for you to refinance. So if I have a mortgage that is, I don't know, 5%, perhaps going down to 3.65 fixed makes sense. But if I have something that is, say for example, 3.7%, perhaps doing this does not make sense because I'm not going to save a whole lot of money by refinancing, but I will actually end up paying more in fees. So that might not necessarily make sense. So you want to do calculations on your own end of what might make sense for you. The second thing that you want to pay attention is the value of your property. So what is that? How much equity, okay, do you have inside that home? and what is your purpose for refinancing. Sometimes people refinance just to go from really high rate to a lower rate. And by the way, when I say really high rate and point to a 5, historically speaking, 5% is a super amazing rate. But however, for today's times and what we are being offered, obviously 3.65 is much better than 5%. It's much cheaper, okay? So you want to pay attention to what your equity is and what your value. So what is the amount of money that this property would actually appraise for. When they do appraisals, they don't do appraisals based off of the sort of the taxable amount, right? They actually do it, so that would be like an assessment, the government assessment, but they will do it based off of the market. And there have been homes that have been up for sale that nobody's touching now for multiplicity of reasons. One of the big reasons is obviously that the courts are closed, so you can't really transfer the property, even though the rates are pretty good. Like what is it good if you can't legally transfer it? Although people will get very creative utilizing attorneys and contracts and stuff that they will file potentially later. So there are people that are still doing deals, and it is something to consider. For me right now, it just feels a bit risky. I like to have it documented that this property is truly mine, because if things happen, if paperwork gets lost, if there's all these different weird claims, you could be potentially owning it for a little while only to find out it's not legally yours. So for that reason, it's a bit risky and scary for me. But what I've also seen is that there are more and more homes starting to enter the market. Why people are putting it out for market is anybody's guess. There's probably multiple reasons, from people needing money to people wanting to move to they've been planning to sell anyways. They're hoping that, maybe they can get a good deal and get out of the dodge, so to speak, right? So they're trying to move somewhere else. So whatever the reason, more is entering the market, which is going to drive the prices of all homes down. So when you have a supply and a supply is growing, but the demand is sort of stalling or falling, the prices actually have to fall so that they can meet potentially the demand. That's sort of kind of how things work. So things to consider is, what you're trying to do and refinance, like what for. If you're looking to pull cash out, perhaps now before the prices fall might make sense for you. If you are not looking to do anything with it and you're just going to ride it out, perhaps leaving it alone might also make sense for you. And here are some of the things to consider if you decide to refinance. Say that I do have $100,000 in equity, okay, and I want to pull the cash out for whatever reason. Maybe I want to sit on cash, maybe I want to prepare so that I can buy something. If this property was valued at $500,000, okay, and it drops 30%, okay, it's going to lose $150,000 in value. If I refinance, typically people will refinance for the full market value. I might find myself underwater, meaning I owe more money than the property is worth. Properties potentially can go up in value, and they typically do, but it takes a little bit of time. And I think, kind of based off of the jobless claims and what is going on and what's happening, I think that unless some sort of crazy liquidity yet enters, which I think it will, I just don't know to what level and how people are going to respond, valuation of these could take a little while to go up. So if you're okay with holding on to a property even if it's underwater because you're living in it or you're renting and it's still positive cash flow, and you're able to do something quite cool with the money that you have pulled out, it might make sense to do it. Just plan on holding it for forever. Well, I don't know for forever, but hold it on for much longer time than you originally thought. Because you wouldn't be able to sell it for the amount of money that you owe. So that's something to really, really consider. As I have mentioned, we are entering an age and a stage of depression or depreciation. I don't know that we have entered depression, and who knows, we might not ever get there, but it's definitely a recession where we are right now. And as I have said, they can't call it. But it is definitely a deflationary concept that is happening. So that basically means that assets will actually go down in monetary value. So your dollar is going to be highly worth it. And you could potentially consider that, okay, well, I'll lose this 30%, but the value of my cash might go up, I don't know, 10% or 20%. So my loss is not as big. You just want to know what exactly you're using this money that you pulled out for. Uh, there are going to be properties that are going to be listed for sale. Prices are going to drop. So for some folks who are saying, you know what, I have this property, I don't plan on selling it. The rate that I am paying is really high. I do have some equity. I'm going to pull cash out. I'm going to sit on it. I'm not going to use it for anything but for investments as they come our way, because they will come our way. It's just a matter of time and a lot of patience. So maybe repositioning might make sense. Be prepared that this is going to drop in value, and you have to be okay with that if you decide to go with this scenario. I just don't know how much. And the reason I'm putting 30% is because in the last depression in the 1920s and 30s, we have seen real estate drop 30 to 50%. Typically 30% was in these like flat markets that I have already explained in one of the previous videos. And then in places like New York City, the prices have dropped as much as 65 to 70%. So if you're in a highly cyclical markets, do expect that 30% is not going to happen in your area. It's going to be much, much higher, or the price is going to be much lower, depending how you look at it. So I think you understand what I'm talking about. The second piece that I also want to address is that I know that for some folks, you might have been looking for a different job, ability to quit your job, ability to sort of work out of the business and that kind of stuff. Right now, the stability of everything is highly questionable. And so my personal take, and again, please, you do what makes sense for you, okay? Don't let me tell you what to do. You need to make your own decision of what makes sense for you. But this is just my thinking. Because of what's happening right now, I don't think is the good time to quit your job. At least right. That's just my opinion, and the reason for that is that, should something happen with the business that no longer can sustain you, and there's a lot of businesses that are losing a lot of money right now, you want to have some sort of income still coming in, because it's going to help with carrying everything and stashing some of that cash, especially if you have already figured out your living expenses and this money is just coming in. So you can use it to pay down the credit card debt and the car debt and that kind of stuff. And be able to store as much cash as possible. And whether you hold it in cash, whether you hold it in some alternative investments that I will definitely do a video on, that's again your decision. But I think right now sort of quitting the job might not be the best idea. And I know for some folks, like, they hate what they do and they're not enjoying it in any way, shape, or form. What I'm asking folks to do is try to reposition yourself. A lot of the stuff is in our heads, and I know that some jobs are much harder than others, but what I'm asking folks to do is think of all the good things that are in the job. Think of all the benefits that you have. Find things that you love and enjoy doing and focus on those things. Really spend time of reframing the stuff, because when we focus on one thing, right? Like if I was to focus on this marker alone, I can focus on this marker, but I don't see anything in the periphery because I'm just focused on this. If this was the negative things about my job or my life or my health or whatever, that's all I am seeing. I'm not able to see any of the good stuff. And what I'm saying, this is part of that mindset that folks need to start shifting. If I'm able to sort of acknowledge that, yes, this marker exists, right? But it's not that big comparative to everything behind me, to me as a whole, even to my glasses. It's not that big. So I can focus on other things and look to minimize this problem and put it in a true perspective, because you can see how small it actually is in comparison to me. But what we do is we focus on this, right? And look how big that thing is right now. put it in a right perspective, reframe things in your head, and find benefits of having that job, even if you don't like it. Because if you quit, you can't claim unemployment. Okay, so that's sort of the piece that sometimes folks don't always understand, but I think it's important for us to understand. So find things that are beneficial. You want to have as much income coming your way as humanly possible from as many different sources. And right now is not the time to quit. Right now is the time to push, to focus, to try to sort of spread out, so to speak. And I know it's hard, and wherever we are right now, based off of the stuff that I have seen kind of come in, I think it's going to get even harder for at least 6 months on the short end, probably 18 to 36 months, but we will come out of this stuff. And I truly do believe that we as humans can do way more than we ever thought possible. We can push ourselves harder and further we ever thought possible. All of it is about reframing our mind and focusing on the good of what's happening as opposed to the bad. So even with the stuff that I was sharing here with you, and even though I do believe that some really hard times are coming our way, there's also going to be a lot of good stuff that comes out of it and throughout it. And so our focus, our job, your job, my job, is to focus on the good things, things that we can control, things that we can enjoy, looking for small bits and pieces that will lift our spirits, that will lift us up, having that goal that we're working towards. So if it's investing in more property, if it's moving to a different location, if it's buying a beach house, if it's building a business, great. Keep that. Keep whatever it is that is keeping you motivated. That's sort of that light at the end of the tunnel, and keep working towards it. Focus on those things. Don't focus on the negativity. You absolutely want to and need to understand what is happening so that you can adjust your methodology of how you get towards your shining light, but you want to keep that light at the center. So instead of focusing on this marker that is a problem, focus on your goal that you have in front of you of what you're working towards, and start having a plan of how you're going to get there. It's not going to be easy. A lot of opportunities are going to be coming our way, and it's really about sort of measuring what makes more sense for us. Okay, so start thinking through those things. Now, I've already talked about the reason that you need to keep a job. I also want to acknowledge that for some folks, that's simply not the possibility, because maybe your job is heavily physical, right? Like you have to carry heavy objects or lift heavy objects, or like dig ditches and stuff, and that does a lot of wear and tear on our body, and physically we cannot do that. So you also want to consider your health, and it really ends up being this fine balance of what to do. I can't tell you what to do. It's not my job, and I don't think it's right, because I am not you. I don't have all of the things that you have in order to understand what's going on. But I think by doing this and kind of portraying stuff, perhaps I am opening your mind as to what is possible, as to kind of how to think through these things. And even with the stuff happening, like I said, I do expect these things to go lower, but I also expect these things to go lower. So that's something that you want to keep in the back of your head when you're doing analysis of what you should do next. Having some cash, if you don't have it, is a really, really good idea, partially because you might need it to live, and partially because of the things that are going to drop. You're going to be able to buy some amazing properties, some amazing assets, from obviously real estate all the way to even some of the stocks, as well as businesses, if you choose to do that in the near future. So instead of getting caught up in the moment and feeling rushed, because I get that sometimes, my heart starts beating. I feel like I have to do everything really fast. Take a deep breath, acknowledge what's happening, take a deep breath, go for a walk, meditate, do whatever you need to do to calm down, and then start thinking through it strategically of what would make sense. Start throwing any and all ideas, don't censor it, and then later you can go back and say, okay, this was really stupid, I'm not going to do that, but this actually has a potential that I could work on. that is going to give you more options, more opportunities, and likely lift your spirits. And that is going to be hugely important for us to do as we progress forward. I hope this is helpful to you. Until next time, stay forever money blessed. And remember, you are only one deal away.